Okay, we're back. Oops. So I need to mount the bracket. I need to do this quickly because this video camcorder battery is about to die. So one of the things that I want to do before I put this bracket back on is sandwich a little bit of fluid film between the bracket and the mount on the frame to delay the formation of rust as long as possible. So that's all I want. And now we want to put a little bit of anti-seize snot on these bolts, 15mm bolts. And then of course after this is all dogged down, we'll spray these bolts with some more fluid film snot. You guys still with me? Yeah, you're still with me. Maybe some light, that would be helpful, hey? Okay, let's leave that there for now because there's another bolt that goes in here and it's a little bit more difficult. I did take these bolts and I soaked them in Evaporust for who knows how many days, probably close to a week. So trying to keep the rust monster at bay for as long as possible. So that hopefully, now this other nut goes on the back end where you probably can't see it, and you're just gonna have to trust me. Now, if I had one of those swivel sockets, I could probably reach this bolt from the opposite side, but I don't have swivel sockets. And when you're a DIY guy, you gotta go with what you have. So see if I can turn it at all. Is it tight? Yeah, it's tight. Can't turn it by hand. So this is going to be... Yeah, I can't get a socket back there. A regular socket I can't get back there, that is. Because this bearing is half sitting on top of this nut. Can I do more of a smooth? Oh, we're getting there. Slowly but surely. Just gonna make that tight so that I can't put a torque wrench on it anyway. And for this nut, tight. Okay, now the last thing to do is to put these 10mm nuts on the bracket flange, and for this you're going to need a long socket, and these nuts go on here. I have to hold this like this because this wonderful Craftsman stuff I'll show you. Oops. Yep. it doesn't hold the sockets. And this is a relatively new 1/4 inch ratchet, and it already is not working very well. Probably should have squirted some fluid film on this flange too, since that's basically what rotted out on the first one. But I didn't, and I'm not going to take it apart to do that. I will definitely spray fluid film on the outside of this though. After all, was made the new steering shaft and bearing, that is. This is a Dorman product. I didn't have any other choice. I'm not a fan of Dorman. Cheap Chinese crap. But beggars can't be choosy. Okay, so that is the reassembly process for the intermediary shaft. And I'm sure it's much easier without the fender on than trying to do all this with the fender on. So at least you get a kind of a bird's eye view of what's involved. I still have to torque this nut to its proper specifications, and I still have to install, not the nut, the bolt. Torque this bolt and install the bolt on the steering box side. And time is pressing, so I'm gonna wrap that up off camera because I have to move on and do something else today before I get into the meat of this project, which is reinstalling the new fender where the old fender once rested. So, but obviously this is a important step before I can reinstall the fender, and so I'm glad it's over. I will take the steering wheel tie down off, but I'm not going to make an attempt to turn the wheels right now because the car is only up on jack stands on one side, so on the opposite side, the passenger side, the wheel is on the ground. But I will give it, you know, at least a turn to its margins, if you will, because there is some play in the steering wheel. I think I'm going to need to adjust the steering box for that, and I may do that. I'll look into that and see if it's easier to do that with the fender off than with the fender on, but that's another tale. So that's it. On to the next phase of this after I get done with my other errands. Thanks for watching this piece. We'll see you in a little while. first step in reinstalling the Fender is reinstalling this mounting bracket, which the Fender bolts into. As you can see, I have completely de-rusted and repainted this thing. Of course, it was originally yellow, along with the original color of the Jeep, but I wasn't even going to make an attempt at matching colors. So I've got it back on, and for the nuts, because there are 2 nuts and 2 bolts that hold this on. There's one of them. The other nut, I'm not sure if you can see it, but it's over in there. So I've gooped that up with fluid film snot, and here are the bolts down here. If I got that on camera, where are you? There they are. I haven't snotted them up yet, but I will. But anyway, the bottom line is that this bracket is installed, and I'm doing this bit by bit. Another thing that I did, I don't know if you can see it. Let me see if I can zoom in here. I sprayed some fluid film snot in between the bracket and the body, and hopefully that will stave off the rust for some period of time. And overall, of course, the hope is that all of this effort to de-rust and refinish all these brackets, or that I won't be seeing any rust in this area for hopefully years to come. Anyway, so that's it. That bracket is on, and I can now move on. I still have not torqued the steering column because I haven't found the right torque spec. I'm still looking for it. I'm sure I'll find it shortly. Then I'll torque up the steering column, split bolts, and or split nuts, split something, and then I can put the Fender on. Okay, until next time. Okay, look what we have. We have installed, or I have installed, the new Fender. And it's all fitted mounting bolts, all the way down, and certainly it was fiddly. Took a couple hours to put it all together. Couldn't quite get the alignment right without the help of my jack, where I put a block of wood under here because it wouldn't lift up quite enough to get into place, at least without a little bit of help. And then once I had it in place, of course, I fastened the bolts on. So now I'm in the process of putting the accessories back on. Here I have reinstalled the horn. I'm not completely sure that that is the correct orientation. Here's a lesson learned, as I'm not the only one who's ever said this. I just haven't practiced the advice given by others. Take pictures. I did not take a picture of the horn configuration before I took it all apart, which was probably not very smart. But it doesn't seem to be in the way of anything, and if I need to shuffle things around, then I'll do a brief update of the horn and the 2 brackets. And so now we're going to reinstall the windshield wiper tank, and then we'll go on to the vapor recirculation stuff. But we're making progress here, and so very happy. Okay, onward to the next milestone. See ya. Alrighty, back again. Continuing to work out where these brackets all go. I have this canister bracket back on, but there are a couple of rubber grommets that I've put somewhere so clever I can't find them, at least not yet. I have not installed the wiper tank because none of the holes are lining up at all. So not sure what's going on there, so I'll probably just leave that loose until I've got this other bracketry all settled. There's one more bracket that this stuff goes on to mount. So I put this on kind of temporarily, not quite sure about the wiring harness routing yet. So I will work through that as I go, but the first order of business is to tear the garage apart looking for those grommets, because I know I didn't discard them, but I can't remember where I put them. So that's where we are so far, and it looks like I'm going to wind up having to drill some holes for the washer tank, and also I'm not too happy with these original bolts, and I think that because the access to the underside of the fender is so easy here, that I think I'm going to switch these out to stainless steel bolts with nylon cap nuts on the underside. But at least it's solid for now. But one of these isn't holding very well. I think it's this one that is not holding very well. All these bolts were, or screws were pretty heavily rusted. They probably lost some of their diameter in the derusting process, so that could be a factor in why they're not holding so well. But I'll deal with that in due course. The main objective right now is to get all of these parts situated back to where they belong and put the car back together. So got to find the rubber grommets for this, then I've got to install the bracket for this, and then there's one more bracket. There's a tray that goes down there, which is going to be the last thing that I put on, and then we also have the blinker light to reinstall, and of course we have the fender flare that still has to go on. But we're getting there, slowly but surely. Things are going back together, and relatively speaking, they're going back together okay. It's no major problems yet. So we'll be back for another update at some point, and I'll show you how we've progressed. Okay, see ya. Okay, time for another progress update. Got the canister secured, got the other recirculation stuff bracket remounted, and I don't have any unaccounted for connectors. I just need to secure some of these wires so that they don't jumble around, and put a few tie wraps on the washer fluid container. I cleaned that up a little bit. Now here I did have a problem where the holes didn't line up. So for the washer fluid reservoir, I used a self-tapping bolt here, or screw I guess, and a self-tapping bolt down there. These are zinc. I'm going to replace them shortly with stainless steel so they don't invite rust. And but that's all I had on hand, and I only had one size of one bolt down here, there, and then this is a slightly smaller size. But the washer fluid reservoir is fully secure. It's not going anywhere. And so the only thing on the interior of the engine compartment that I have left to do is to reinstall that tray down there, which will not be difficult. And then I can move out here to routing the wire harness for the blinkers and the side lamp, and install the side lamp and the blinker and the fender flare, and then I can put the tire back on. If you've seen some of my other videos, I did remove the brake line there and straighten some mess out, so I have already rebled the brake, so that's ready to go. And so we're almost there. We are almost there. So onward to the next series. I'll put the tray in down here first. That should be very simple. And you may notice, where's my zoom? Where's my focus? Come on, focus. I got those U-clips, those U-nut clips. Originally I had said that I would just change them out for nuts, but I realized that that was kind of impractical in terms of doing the old reach around to get those things all secured. So as you can see, I put a lot of fluid film snot on them, so hopefully that'll keep them from rotting out for some years to come. And of course, I'm going to do a rust hunt every year on this Jeep and refresh the fluid film in these areas where there has been some corrosion. Other than that, I guess that's about it for this update, and we'll update you further when I get the tray in and I've worked out the blinker light situation here. Okay. See you in a bit. Okay, people. We are done, I think. Got the fender flare on. I got these new fender flare nuts. I kind of like the way they look. They're slightly small and they just barely make it through the sheet metal to secure them on the other side. What I really want to do is put nut certs in, but I'm not sure whether or not I should do the nut certs now or wait till after the fenders are painted and do the nut certs after the paint. Not quite sure. So for now, it will stay. But tires on, car's back on the ground, no more jack stands, and everything is back together. So we've got our horn, we've got our washer fluid reservoir, we've got our canister. I found the rubber grommets for the canister, and it's now firmly in place. And I've got the rest of this, which is air recirculation or vapor recirculation, I think, all squared out. I do not have any dangling connectors or what have you, so I think I've got everything put back together correctly, and I've got the tray down there installed, and so it looks like it's finished. I haven't started it up yet. I got pulled away by some other things, and there is one more detail that I have to finish, which is over here. I took off, where'd that thing go? I don't know where I put it now. I took off that little step, and there were a couple of spots of bare metal or surface rust, so I primed them like I have with all the other spots of rust on the tub, and I'm going to let that dry overnight before I put that little step back on. And so that'll be the last step for the driver's side fender replacement. Did put the wheels back on, but I have not torqued them. And it's unlikely that I will forget to do that, because that's happened to me once before with nearly disastrous results. So I will make sure that those lug nuts are torqued. I just want to move the car a few feet back and forth to make sure that the tires are seated correctly, and we'll go from there. So here we are. I'm overall very pleased with how it's come out. I was concerned about the Chinesium factor and how well of a fit it was going to be or not going to be. It was a reasonably good fit. And, you know, there goes my trouble light. As I've said, a little bit of trouble up here, but used my jack to, my hydraulic jack to encourage the fender to come into position here. So that was all fine. There's a little bit of a paint chip here. But the seam is quite tight, and so maybe it's too tight for all I know. But in any event, so that's basically it. So lessons learned, which is a lesson that I really shouldn't have learned, which is that either take notes or take pictures, because this stuff is right here especially is relatively complicated, and it did take me some time to remember how all this went back together, and a couple of strategic pictures would have helped an awful lot. So as I'd mentioned earlier, not quite sure if the horn is put back together exactly correctly, but it's not in the way of anything, so it's going to be fine. And the only problem that I really encountered, you know, a problem of significance anyway, with this Fender is that the holes for the washer fluid reservoir were not lining up correctly. If you can see it down there, there's a hole right here. Where's my, can you see my finger? There's a hole right there. But this plastic radius would not allow the hole to line up with that hole. And if I did line it up over here or try to, then the holes over here wouldn't line up. And there was no hole here at the top of the fender, which I wound up using self-tapping screws here and here. And as I've said previously, these are temporary. I'm going to go to the store and I'm going to pick up some stainless steel screws, and I do still intend to replace some of these screws with bolts, just because they're not super tight, and I do think that that has to do with the fact they were pretty heavily rusted and they lost some of their diameter to rust, and so they're not really gripping that well. And if I try to tighten them too much, I'm sure that I'll strip out the fastener, or the sheet metal rather, so that it won't hold. So these two nuts I intend to replace, these two screws rather, I intend to replace with bolts, and the same for this screw down here, which is holding on the canister. And I think that that is it. So everything else is looking good, and I don't see any interference here, and everything is connected. There are no hoses unaccounted for, and so I think that in terms of installation, we're done. And that means, of course, that we can now turn the car around for better access to this side, and this fender also needs to be replaced. This bracket I've already reconditioned. I won't have to do it again, but I do have some custom stuff going on here, which obviously I will have to drill holes for and whatever, to remount the air filter and the screen. So that will come in time, but the real problem is going to be underneath the battery, because I know that the tray underneath the battery is all corroded, and I will most likely have to drill out the bolts that are holding the tray on. It's very similar to the tray over there, and I'm not even going to really waste my time. I'm just going to drill them out and replace them. Hopefully the The Fender will not give me too much trouble in terms of busted bolts and whatnot, but we'll find out when we get into it. But you can see this is just a tip of the iceberg here in terms of what's going on with this Fender, and there's very little under here left. So again, we're going to turn the car around because I have more access on the other side, but the fender flare will come off, the tire will come off, that step on this side will come off, the fender will come off. We'll recondition whatever bracketry we need to recondition, and then we'll put it all back together. I do intend, though, when I have this all apart, I do have a pretty sketchy wiring thing for the auxiliary lights. I'd like to clean that up while I have the opportunity. Here are a couple of the relays for that lighting. There's where is it? Casting a shadow here. There is a ground junction, if you will, for all of that stuff. There's another relay down there, so I may clean that up a bit while everything is apart, and kind of get it all sorted, so to speak, while I'm in here working on this side of the car. And then from there, I do need to buy new mounts because these are rusted underneath, and the one over here basically twisted off, so I'm not going to reuse it. So I'm still going to have to order that. And so that I think that kind of wraps it up at this point. If you're wondering about my air intake, does it help? Since this is the 2.5, and the 2.5 deserves its reputation as a weak engine in terms of power output, actually I think that it did help a little bit. I also put a Borla catback exhaust system on the car that was also supposed to improve horsepower a little bit. I didn't notice any difference whatsoever after I put the Borla exhaust on, but I didn't change out the headers or anything like that, and like I said, there was no noticeable difference, but I thought that there was a bit of a difference, and I probably did get that promised 10% out of this air intake. So I will of course have to take this off in order to take the fender off. That's fine, but it is what it is. So what to do about the engine, that's for some other day, and I may not do anything with the engine. The only thing that makes me hesitate about thinking about doing something with the engine is that I do not feel comfortable driving this car on 70-mile-an-hour highways, because the engine screams in pain, and I don't feel confident driving at high speeds down the highway. And when I drive this Jeep, I do everything that I possibly can to stay on secondary roads so that I don't wind up on a high-speed roadway because of the way the car feels and the way the car sounds. So even in fifth gear. So anyway, you know, if it weren't for that, it would be an easier decision for me to say the engine stays, because I wasn't looking for a race car. I wasn't looking for high power, and I liked it. What appealed to me about this engine was its simplicity, relative simplicity, but there's a trade-off, which is that it's not a very powerful engine, and I've investigated all the options, and there really is not a whole hell of a lot that you can do to squeeze more power out of this particular engine. So anyway, we'll see what happens down the road. I'm not in any rush to solve that problem. And in the meantime, I just want this car to be a good driver for what it is, and we'll go from there. So to be continued when we get into the right-hand side of the of the fender replacement project. I will say that so far it looks like the driver's side is the more complicated of the two to remove and reinstall, but I haven't gotten that fender off yet, so my opinion may change down the road a bit, pun intended. So we will see. You may notice here this bracket is corroded, but it's riveted on, so there's not a whole hell of a lot that I was willing to do about that. So I think I'll just hose that down with some fluid film snot and call it a day. I can't solve absolutely everything on this car. So anyway, I've rambled on enough. I think I'm going to call it here and try and hobble a video together and post it on YouTube before I start with the fender. And I also have, I want to clean up the garage so I'm ready for phase 2 of this adventure. I've got tools everywhere and whatnot, so I'm going to spend a couple hours getting organized before I take on the right side. So that's it. See you later. Bye.